before I introduce Mr. Chong Wei, I wanted to share this with you, which I found in The Economist last year. 30% of construction process is rework, abortive work, as we call it in Mauritius, 30%. And this what triggers issue with dispute claims and negligence as well. And 60% of construction labor effort is wasted, again, due to abortive work, due to design coordination, and all these get catapulted into claims and negligence and contractor issues. So there was a recent survey. Again, I do read I just checked out the magazine on a Friday. I'm quite sad, so I was reading a magazine. The key main issues and dispute in the past 12 months is this. I'm not too sure if you can really see it, but the first one is extension of time. 50% of the dispute is on extension of time. That's a survey done by the building industry in the UK and globally as well. The next one is valuation of final account, valuation of variation, which is at 42%. Loss and expense, contractors obviously having resources idle because of whatever reason. Defective work is at 38%. Amazing. Failure to comply with payment provision, not paying people on time. Again, these are dispute. There's also valuation of interim payments. Contractors design portion. We've always been in a tricky situation where we don't know where the design liability rests, whether it's with the consultant, whether it's with a contractor, or whether it's with a subcontractor. Engineer's instruction, 30%, non-payment of fees, failure to give the right decision on time. We also have determination and termination. Architect instruction, we have a lot of architect as well. And again, it's all part of PMI instruction, EI engineer's instruction, and architect instruction. And others are about 6%. So these are the past key items which are triggering dispute right now in the industry. So without any further ado, we are right on time. I want to introduce Mr. Chong Wei quickly, who's the founder of WCW Consulting in Malaysia. Mr. Wong Chong Wei is a chartered quant surveyor with over 20 years of experience in the construction industry, involving major infrastructure and commercial development projects. Beside that, Mr. Chong Wei was a former board member of the RICS in Malaysia, and he's also the RICS licensed trainer to conduct training courses of delays and disruption loss, and also loss and expense variation management. He's one of the RICS accreditation panel members for QS degree program. He's very active. Also, he's a trained assessor since 2015 for the APC for new members of RICS. Finally, Mr. Wong is specialized in expert advice and assistance on commercial and contractual matters. He has accepted the appointment as the educator, mediator, and expert witness in a number of construction and engineering dispute. So again, put your hands up, please, you can put the hand icon to give Mr. Chong Wei a round of applause. Already, I've already got 35, 40, 50. Thank you very much indeed. So we're going to pass over to Mr. Chong Wei, which will be part one. Okay. So Mr. Chong Wei, over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and
okay,
we're going to get Mr. Chong Wei over now. Okay,
right,
so yes, I'm going to leave my video on just to make sure if there's anything Mr. Chong Wei can know that I'm hearing him, just in case, because webinar is quite a learning stuff as well. So if you don't see me, there might be issues. So I can say, oh, yeah, I'm hearing it. So without any further ado, Mr. Chong Wei, all yours, and we are set to go. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Anil. Yeah, hi everyone. Good evening. Thank you for the warm welcome from Anil and everyone. My name is Wong Chong Wei. I'm from Malaysia. Currently here is about 9 p.m. Your side will be around 5 p.m. plus. So good evening to everyone. Okay, so today the topic that I'm going to share actually will be the good practices in construction contractual documentations, what and how. So I will base on my perspective, especially Malaysia experience, and see whether my sharing and those principles were able to apply in your situation. Right, especially you have the very nice features as Mauritius, and I understand there are also many Mauritius as based in the overseas, such as Canada, Australia, and other part of the world. So welcome for this particular session. Right, so I will turn to next slide. Okay, just how thanks for Anil have been briefly share about my background. So I also briefly share with you, and I will later play one short video for your viewing pleasure. So yes, I'm chartered quantity surveyor as well as chartered building engineer in UK, and I'm practicing as adjudicator and mediator in Malaysia as well. So I'm being a certified trainer under the Human Resource Development Fund, and I've been actively involved in construction industry for over 20 years. So I started my career with the main contractor company, being a construction firm, who has built 3 Formula Ones in the world. So I was quite fortunate to involve the first Formula One racing circuit in Malaysia, followed by a fact study in Bahrain, as well as Abu Dhabi. I also attached, eventually I was headhunted to join an M&E services company, being a head of commercial, then also taking care of all the commercial and contractual issue. Interestingly, M&E services company nowadays in Malaysia acknowledge quantity surveyor or quantity surveying skill. So more and more M&E services company actually engaging quantity surveying graduate or practitioner to assist them on commercial and contractual issue. Right. I also been attached with the quantity surveying practice for 1 or 2 years for refurbishment shopping mall projects. And currently my practice will be more focusing on the contractual support and advisory, as well as those dispute resolution matter. So let me share with you a short video to let you understand more about my past experience and some training events. Okay, let me check. Yep. Okay. Okay, right. Wait. Okay. So I think briefly you have seen just now some of my past training events in different parts of the world, and especially in Malaysia, and also some of the challenging projects that I have involved. So because I was being a site QS for almost 10 years based at the project site, and I find that contract administration from the especially from the commencement of the receiving of the award until the completion of the project and up to the final account stage, which is very crucial and important. Therefore, but because of the today the time constraint, I pick up a few common example on some of the good practices and the poor practices as well. So let's start with the commencement of work, right? Usually, I'm not too sure about Mauritius practice. In Malaysia, we still have, for the past, actually quite many contractors or employers actually issuing letter of intent as in order to actually get the contractor, successful bidder or contractor, to kickstart the preparation work, such as those preliminary preparation, setting up the site office, setting up the site boundary. However, as we know, letter of intent actually is not really a valid contract. It's good to have letter of acceptance, right? Or Malaysia, we call letter of award. So then it depends how soon the employer or client will issue the letter of acceptance upon the issuance of the letter of intent. However, so any compensation in case where the contractor has carried out the work at the job site, so we're up to what level of completion, or whether the contractor carry out a physical work, then this particular physical work based on the mere letter of intent will be very challenging, because letter of intent, although under common law, actually we're able to compensate what we call based on the quantum merit basis, which means we're based on the whatever the contractor has been done on site, so based on the market rate. So therefore, I will still encourage the contractor, although receiving the letter of intent, also need to read through what will be the content of the letter of intent, what will be the coverage or scope, because why? Still subject to the confirmation of the terms and conditions eventually, and is a future tense, right? So next, if really the contractor has carried out the work, then make sure the contractor carry out the work based on letter of intent, have the proper documentation and verified by the client representative or the client consultants, to ensure in the event eventually during the course of negotiation on the terms of condition for the letter of acceptance, eventually unable to agree, then still have a very good record to seek compensation from the employer. So therefore, it's advisable the successful contractor to have timely monitoring in terms of while during the negotiation of the terms and conditions for the letter of acceptance. Okay, right. So then followed by the oral instruction, also quite commonly happen in Malaysia. I'm not too sure about in Mauritius. So sometimes the consultant may issue verbal instruction due to the site constraint. Then eventually the contractor is, with a good practice, will be to formalize and confirm the engineer instruction. Then the extension of time. So sometimes, of course, in Malaysia practice, there are many contractors or subcontractors not really there to issue like notice of delay, or in the FIDIC of contract, the FIDIC form of contract called notice of claim. So, however, the notice of delay, or we call notice of claim, actually is a condition precedent, or in the FIDIC form of contract called this, if the contractor failed to serve the notice of delay when the delay event commenced, then which means we're not entitled for the time or any additional payment due to that particular event. Or contractual claims, insufficient documentation, poor records. Of course, good practice will be proper documentation or with all the contemporary records. Later, we'll discuss a little bit more details on each and every one item. Okay, so just now we have mentioned about the good practice and poor practice about letter of intent and acceptance. So now we go more discuss about the letter of acceptance. So if the contractor successfully received the letter of acceptance, as since now we have mentioned about letter of intent, right? So now we focus on the letter of acceptance, which means if the contractor received the letter of acceptance, usually will be quite happy. Sometimes you may celebrate. However, what will be the next task? Whether the contractor team should consider to review the terms and conditions before recommending the management to sign this particular award. As we know, business deal is very important in order to make the company sustain throughout the period. However, I will strongly advise to review the terms and conditions and identify the risk and opportunity provisions. So with this particular assessment, we're really able to assist the contractor to aware what will be the potential risk and potential opportunity. For example, some of the terms of the conditions actually very onerous or may not be not really favorable to the contractor. So in these particular provisions, I will strongly encourage the contractor to clarify in writing. So usually in our Malaysia practice, usually my clients, I will assist them to review terms of the terms and conditions as well, row by row, word by word, to identify any potential ambiguities or any potential risk, especially those terms and conditions inconsistent with the condition or discussion during the tender stage. So therefore, ensure the entire scope or the provisions of the letter of intent well covered and balanced on the risk. Of course, what if the client received your clarification letter, then eventually not really accept it and just inform you that you either take it or leave it, or you sign the document, the letter of acceptance. Normal. At least you try to clarify, identify all these potential risks and items that actually is not really in favor to you and clarify. Then eventually you still want to accept that particular letter of award, no problem, you can proceed. However, at least your team member or your project team member were able to know what are the selling points or what are the potential risks that to focus as well as to alert. Then you can plan it accordingly. So with that exercise, so your project team member were able to mitigate those particular risks and leverage the opportunity. Okay. So this particular construction project timeline, basically to show that from the start of the contract, followed by those important key milestones throughout the course of the work until the end of the contract. And this particular chart I based on the FIFRA book because I understand that your Mauritius side actually using FIFRA form of contract very commonly. And I also I didn't already allocated those key courses such as time and cost related provisions. Then you notice the important certificate, taking over certificate and performance certificates. Right. Next one, oral instruction. So according to the key clause, according to the clause 3.3 of the instruction of the engineer under the FIFRA provisions, sometimes the consultant may visit the project site and notice some of the works elements were required to change at the project site to cater the site constraint or to facilitate the site progress activity. Or sometimes the engineer may want to change some finishes. However, whether this particular oral instruction valid or not, according to this particular clause, right? So it's good to formalize it, which the contract already provided, right? Then the contractor is advisable to write in formalize this particular instruction. Then within 2 days, if the engineer didn't respond or ignore, then it does, which means this particular instruction will be constitute a confirmation instruction from the engineer. Then you will entitle whatever time and cost implication entitlement under the contract provisions. So this will be a very good practice. Right. And next clause will be clause 1.5, priority of documents. For me, I find that this particular clause, right, very important, especially for the project and contract team who administer the particular course of work and event. So sometimes the construction contracts or construction documentation usually will have tends to have discrepancy. Those documents is inconsistent with the tender document. The reason why I personally find this particular clause very important is because in Malaysia, there are some instances where the consultant, when they're compiling the documents from tender documents to convert to contract documents, so may have some challenging time frame or because of the documentation issue. So then may have some inconsistent documentation. Then for this particular clause actually will assist the contractor in the event any discrepancy arise, then you will know how to follow according the sequence of the documents to identify and to verify what will be the accuracy or what will be the validity of that particular document. As you can see, this particular clause, the higher top priority will be contract agreement, followed by letter of acceptance, then followed by letter of tender. So as you can see, letter of acceptance still with the priority than the particular condition. Therefore, as I mentioned earlier, letter of acceptance provision is really important to review before you accept that particular contract. Right. Next, clause 1.6 contract agreement under FIFRA book. Basically, the consultant will require to compile the documents, can convert from tender documents to contract documents upon issuance of the letter of acceptance. So which means within 28 days, this particular document must be ready. So I'm also a little bit interested to know how's the Mauritius practice, whether consultant able to really within 28 days compile the documentation ready for the contractor. But just to share with you, Malaysia practice sometimes maybe because of complexity or challenging for the consultant to compile voluminous of the documents within a short time frame. However, I think we have the latest form of contract, which is under architect form, already included one provisions where the architect must compile all the documentation within 14 days and issue to the contractor upon issuance of the letter of acceptance. I think this is quite a good practice. In the event if any discrepancy or dispute arise, the contract documents really very important reference documents, so that in order to really compile all the documentations or minutes of meeting, tender clarification, all bound into these particular contract documents. And another important sharing will be, I mean, one of my observation, I'm not too sure whether will happen in any cases in Mauritius or not. Sometimes consultant, maybe due to time constraint or due to time urgency, then the consultant, when they convert during tender stage, some of the drawings, they may overlook some of the elements. However, actually this is a true case in Malaysia. However, the consultant, when they compile and convert this particular tender document to contract documents, and the contractor, the pro contractor actually not notice one of the drawings actually with additional element stated in the contract. And this particular contract actually based on lump sum arrangement. Therefore, drawing takes precedence. So then this particular contractor eventually completed the work, and one noticed this particular element actually is not counted for in his price. Then he trying to claim for this particular VO and was rejected by the consultant and client. So now this particular issue become dispute. So they might go into a dispute resolution process or whatever. However, I think the lesson learned will be before the contractor sign the contract documents, it's good to review all the documents, especially consistent with what you have read through or what have you examined, and consistent with the tender documents or any other additional document during tender closing stage and the tender negotiation stage. Ensure all these particular documents are included, fully in the contract documents. Right. Next. So program. Based on clause 8.3 under FIDIP rulebook, basically the work program, the contractor, successful contractor will require to submit this particular work program to the engineer for approval. So within the 28 days. So however, this particular program will not form part of contract due to usually the work program will subject to change during the course of work, which is quite common. However, I still strongly encourage the subcontractor or main contractor really need to prepare a good baseline program, because the work program actually will cater all the key procurement elements or the key dates, especially those long lead items, and followed by those resources planning such as material, manpower, and machinery, and as well as those critical path event. Because why? The extension of time entitlement usually based on the critical path event. Then this particular program actually is a very important tools for the architect or the engineer, for this particular contract administrator with engineer, to refer or assess in the event the contractor claim for additional time or additional cost, or in the FIDIP framework form of contract, the terminology called additional payment due to the delay event. Interestingly, the FIDIP form of contract also provide this particular provision where the contractor will require to submit the revised program in the event when the contractor aware that this particular, the baseline program or the previous program inconsistent with the actual progress. So therefore, it's the contractor obligations to and furthermore, I also encourage the contractor to have a particular team. Basically, usually I think in the Malaysia we have one planner, or we call scheduler, both also playing an important role to monitor and control the site progress. And from there, we'll continuously observe the site activity and timely and periodically update the work program, so that from there, the project manager or project director were able to know what will be the actual physical work, and also able to advise the engineer throughout the progress meeting. And from there, you can mitigate any potential delay event, and also will not overlook or forego your time and cost implication claims. right? So followed by this 8.3 clause, right? The contractor shall promptly give notice to the engineer of specific probable future events or circumstances which may adversely affect the work, increase the contract price, or delay the execution of work. Then the engineer may require the contractor to submit an estimate of the anticipated effect of the future events or circumstances or proposal, which I find this will be the opportunity for the contractor, especially under the video procedure, the variation procedure. So therefore, those important notices under the FIFRA form of contract or any other form of contract usually is a very, very important documents. So not to forego or waive your contractual rights for time and cost. Okay, force majeure. I think now this particular topic will be a hot topic in the world, especially of course in Malaysia and Mauritius as well. So when FIFRA contract actually provided these provisions, and sometimes the client also may delete this particular clause. However, since based on the current situation where the COVID-19 already really impacted many parts of the world, including Malaysia, our construction industry, the contractor, subcontractor, consultant also discussing this particular issue. So then firstly, actually need to check your contract provisions, whether provides force majeure clause or any suspension works provisions, right? So but according to the FIFRA form of contract clause 19.2, so notice of force majeure will required to be served to the engineer within 14 days. So then this is part of the procedure required under the provisions, which is expressly allowed. However, what if the contract provision without force majeure? So what can the contractor do? So based on observation and discussion so far in our industry, basically they can consider as well whether we'll have suspension clause or not. So, or if both clauses also provided in the contract, then may try notify the engineer or client for these particular two clauses, which means based on cover the suspension of work as well as the force majeure. Then basically because due to if the order or instruction from the engineer or client actually because of this COVID or because of the movement control or lockdown, then you stop work, then with this particular order, you may have opportunity to claim costs. Although force majeure actually is a neutral event. Therefore, each party will bear their own costs, right? But however, if your contract provided, then why not? You may try to claim for these particular provisions, then eventually we'll deal with it at the final account stage, right? Although the based on force majeure, likely you will not able to claim costs unless you may consider the suspension clause and with the justification. Of course, we may not go into so detail on this particular topic. Right. So next will be the extension of time. I think not only extension of time, also with the variations or any other contractual claims, usually contract will provide the procedure for the contractor to follow in order to make the claim eventually for the entitlement thereafter. Okay, let's discuss about extension of time, which is quite an important topic right now due to the COVID-19. And for clause 20.1 contractor claims, basically when contractor required to give notice of claim of the extension of time within 28 days when this particular event or we call relevant delay event arise or commence, then eventually the contractor serve this particular important written notice to the engineer. Okay, so within 42 days after the contractor became aware of this particular event, giving rise to claim, the contractor shall send to the engineer fully detailed claim supporting documents. However, if the contractor failed to serve this particular notice, which means will bar his entitlement, or we call time bar, or he has waived his contractual entitlement for the time. So employer will also already discharge his liability in this connection with this particular claim. So therefore, when the contractor prepare and submit the detailed claim to the engineer, will require to compile all the contemporaneous record. Therefore, it's advisable the contractor to compile all the relevant contemporary record. Later we discuss about this contemporary record on the next slide. Then this particular provision also very good, which is the provided that the engineer will require to make a decision within 42 days upon contractor submit a fully detailed claim. Although the engineer also has a power to request further documents from the contractor. And the contractor also required to allow the engineer to inspect those relevant records if requested by the engineer. Okay, so good practice for contractual claims, VO, EOT, final claim. So here are all those good records keeping. I will say all these also can be classified under contemporary records because there are some good contemporary record for contractual claims. So those documents actually produced or prepared at the time of the event giving rise to the claim will classify under contemporary record. So actually it's a live record. Otherwise, some of the contractor may practice in the event this particular instruction received from the engineer actually will cause implication or time implication, but may not really within the right time frame to record it and serve the particular notice, or sometimes the changes on site arise, then it's good to snap a photo of before and after. So which means able to demonstrate before these particular changes, what works or what physical work that have been carried out at site. And from there, we pick up the particular photo and get the consultant personnel to verify it, put as a record. Then eventually, when this particular variations or changes carried out by the contractor with a new work element or substitute this particular work, then the contractor also can take photo and seek the consultant representative or consultant engineer to have an inspection, follow up by verify this particular work and put it into record. Then this before and after, I would say those joint measurement record or the inspection work record will be a very good and valid contemporary record to substantiate the claim on time or cost relevant submission, right? Okay. However, so with all this record, right, because we also know the nature and the life cycle of the project, construction project life cycle, and with these particular records, sometimes will require the respective engineers or the site team personnel who in charge on respective services or elements of work, such as civil engineering work, architectural works, or M&E services work. But from the beginning of the project, usually we're more involving in the civil and structural works. Then along the way, we're followed by the M&E services, architectural works. And all those project personnel actually will be transferring out from the project site when come to a certain stage or certain milestone of the project. And the commercial team of the quantity surveyor, the contractor QS team, who compiling all these particular time and cost claims may require to further clarify with those particular personnel. So therefore, it's good to have the timely compilation of this particular record rather than compilation of all this record towards the end of the project. So next important claim that actually I would like to emphasize will be final claim. As we all know, final claim usually will need to compile and submit towards the end of the contract or ends of the project. For example, when come to the stage of taking over certificate. As I mentioned just now, the contractor QS team or contract team, when they compile all these particular important cost-related record for the monetary claim, will require to compile, required to clarify with those personnel. However, if those personnel already transfer or resign, it's quite challenging for the contractor QS team or the contract team to verify all these documents. So therefore, I will encourage the contractor to start to plan to set up a system from the initial stage of the project kickstart until the completion stage, which means with the mindset of begin with the end in mind. So instead of the start to compile when towards the last 3 or 4 months towards near the completion date, then when you have the system to compile all these particular records, which means you from time to time from the foundation work until the completion of the works, which is the last element of work will be M&E services or external work. Then from periodically, the contractor team and the project personnel able to coordinate and liaison with the particular team to identify those important records, which is to ensure that all these particular records already verified and signed off by the respective consultant and the contractor representative. Especially on the quantity measurement, VO records, and also any other day works records. So then from there, we're actually able to really reduce the arguments when discussing or negotiating or justifying the time and cost related claims. Hence, then from there, we're able to mitigate your risk of not getting paid or not getting certification. As long as you, with all these relevant supporting documents, such as the letters, work program to justify your time, site diary, photograph, drawing and measurement, and any other documents.
Chong Wei, just a quick one. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
I've got a quick question related to this. Is an email sufficient for a notice? And also, is a minutes of meeting sufficient as well? So is email, and like people send a notice for email, is an email being a relevant contractual item?
Okay, very good question. So then you need to examine your contract provision, whether electronic transmission, whether classified or allowed under notice, serving a notice. Because usually the notice on time or cost related will require to have by hand delivery or registered post or by fax, which is classified under contract. So although now in the modern world and because of the latest technology, so majority of the contracting party will communicate with the engineer on the serving or in terms of normal communications with the electronic communication, such as the transmission, such as email. But I find that the those notices on time and cost related is good to serve by hand or by hand delivery or by registered post, unless contract conditions stated clearly, email, serving notice via email acceptable by both parties.
Okay.
Then minutes of meeting actually is very important documents, especially when you claim for time or additional payment. So in our term, we call loss and expense. Then minutes of meeting actually also contemporary record, because why? Both parties, contractors and consultant who have carried out this particular meeting, all well recorded, both parties agreed and acknowledge this particular minutes of meeting, then also very important and the valid record to justify any time and cost relevant claims.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yep, okay, thank you for your question. So next will be the key takeaway. Okay. So as usual, for when we discuss about contractual claims and contract training, right, we always can't live away for this particular three important words: records, right? So firstly, we must have a written contract. I'm not too sure how's your practice in the Mauritius. Maybe later you all can share with me. So of course, in Malaysia, still have some of the subcontractor or some of the contracting party may carry out without the proper written documents, written contract. However, based on recent year, because Malaysia, we have statutory adjudication act, this particular practice actually already less practice in terms of, because of the awareness of this particular adjudication act. Therefore, will require must have a written contract, only allow the claimant or the parties who want to initiate claim on to the client side, or them we call respondent, who didn't make payment to their particular contractor. So must have a written contract. Although without adjudication act, I will find that good practice for the contracting party is to have the written contract. Therefore, at least you have a piece of work order or with a written instruction to proceed, which means instruction to proceed this particular work also is a good piece written, I would say is a good written instruction or records, right? Next, if you have carried out the work with a valid contract, sometimes you may forgotten to claim, or you may not want to claim, especially on the variation. In Malaysia practice, sometimes the variation works may require to be approved and valid, only allow the contractor to register into the progress claim, or we call interim claim, right? Based on my observation and my advice to the contractor, usually once you have served the notice of the variation or any notices related to additional work, it's good to once you notify and eventually get approval or you get instruction to proceed, although you may not able to finalize or confirm the price with the consultants or the client side, then it's good to put up and record the work done and register into your claim under the variations, under the schedule of variation or under VO claim element. So from there, you continuing register into your under the VO list, incorporated into the progress claim. Although if the client or consultant may not certify based on the progress claim that you submitted, however, at least you register your rights for the payment, price for the payment. Maybe the quantum will require to be verified or negotiate later. At least you will not forego or waive your right to claim, right? Of course, you may still able to claim later. Sometimes contractor may forgotten this particular VO claim towards the end because of the turnover of the site personnel or because of the contractor QS, right? So therefore, still it's good to submit your timely claim, including the contractual work done, as well as any other claims such as VO, right? Next, work program. I find the work program is very, very important because you must have the baseline work program eventually with all the updated or revised program towards the end, the project. Then you should have your as-built work program. So that from there you can able to demonstrate what are the time implication or any cost implication, or eventually you may go to the dispute resolution stage. Of course, FIDIC contract with the adjudication the dispute adjudication board, so DAB, yes. So from there, actually from there, timely any contractual issue arise, then you will allow this particular DAB board to resolve your issue. Of course, with the timely updated program will really helps. Next, the last one will be the photos. So photos can tell 1,000 words, right? So before of the particular changes or after the particular changes of the works, then this particular photo actually will help you a lot. Especially now we have drone technology. I also have some clients who use a drone, of course, within the validity or legal boundary. So to record the progress of work from the commencement until the end, and also put all the nice pictures incorporated into the progress report and update the consultant or the client timely. So from there, these particular photos will really able to assist the contractor to justify any time and cost related claim. However, yes.
Chong Wei, just quick one. I've got a question in line with the contract. There's a question from a participant on often formal contracts are signed at a later stage of the project. Often formal contracts are signed or executed at a later stage of the project. Does it mean there's no contract up to that time?
So you come again, the delay?
So you know you have a project and the project gets started, yep. But to sign the contract formally, it doesn't happen yep. after like 8 weeks or 10 weeks because the CEO is not here, or the yep. CEO has gone abroad, or the chief executive is not here, or whoever. So does that mean when the project starts up to the contract gets signed, is there a contract at that point of time?
Okay, so of course I'm not a lawyer. However, based on your question and based on my experience under contractual practice, basically, firstly, I'm not too sure whether you based on what basis kickstart the project. Likely you have some verbal instruction, or either you have formalized it, or you may have some form of documents to kickstart the project. Then you have, of course, which means based on what I hear from you or from Anil just now, the contract document will not able to sign within the reasonable period as mentioned in the contract, right? However, as I mentioned earlier, it's good to record and formalize whoever give you the instruction to proceed. Then in order to register under contract law, which is what we call by conduct, right? Formation of contract by conduct, and throughout the series of the event, basically you have carried out the works and recorded all these particular works and timely notify your clients. So from there,
so starting with a letter of acceptance is okay.
Yeah, letter of acceptance is okay. So at least eventually, whether sometime, for example, in Malaysia practice, right, with the letter of acceptance actually is valid. However, is bound with the bound contract will much better, because why? All the relevant important documents, both parties already agree during tender stage, and you as a contractor, you have submitted your tender proposal or commercial proposal based on those documents that are given from the consultants. Then with all these documents bound into one contract document, in the event any discrepancy or any dispute on that particular issue on cost or time, these particular documents will really assist you, especially when you go to arbitration or adjudication or litigation.
Okay.
However,
Right.
if based on letter of,
All right, thank you.
Am I answer the question?
Yeah, I think you've answered the question. And just a quick weird question I've received at the back of record. A client verbally informed a contractor to start work on site. So a client has asked a contractor to start work on site on verbal confirmation. Few days after, request to terminate his contract. How can the contractor claim for the work done on site?
Okay, so a little bit fast. Come again just now.
So the client has asked the contractor to start work
stop
without
work.
just verbally. Can you start work? Can you start,
Okay.
obviously, do excavation? A few days after, the client said, I don't want you on site, get lost. How does the contractor claim for that work done? Is there any, in any fallback position?
Firstly, based on verbal instruction, as I mean, also quite similar to the, of course, a little bit weaker than the letter of intent. I think if you based on verbal instruction, if based on common law basis, of course, you can seek for the legal advice. However, because you can claim, record this particular work done, you can claim for quantum merit basis. So whatever work done you carry out based on the client instruction, of course, you need to put into the record and verify, then put up the claim to this particular client. So based on the quantum merit basis. However, it's good to seek legal advice on this particular matter.
All right, thank you.
Yep. So then I think because of time is running out, so I better have a quick conclusion. So based on this records, it's good to really practice to have all these particular record in order, actually in a way that to make your position have a better bargaining power or better bargaining position when you negotiate contractual claims with your clients. So of course, I always, when I was being a contractor or subcontractor, I'm not really advise my management to proceed with the legal action. Usually I start with the commercial negotiation until the particular issue resolved. However, after you have tried all the avenue, still unable to resolve, both parties cannot come into agreement, then you likely will go for dispute resolution methods such as adjudication or mediation or arbitration or litigation. At least you put yourself in a very good position because you have all this record in order. Then your winning chances is higher than without a right records to recover whatever work done or whatever claims that you have putting in. So therefore, I hope my sharing will able to assist you, and thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you.
Right.
We will move on to the fourth question quickly. Let me, if you can stop share your screen, and I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so everybody can see my screen. So again, hands up if you can see my screen, please. Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to put my light on. Okay, thank you very much. We're gonna need to move on. So thank you very much again, Mr. Chong Wei. I know time is limited, so thank you. It's almost 10 o'clock in Malaysia, so I will need to owe you one day. Whenever if you're coming to Mauritius, so I'll come to Malaysia. So thank you for being here.
Sure,
welcome. So the first question, we have got 4 key questions which I've combined together. So the first one is, A contractor has been appointed on a labor-only contract. The promoter supplies all the materials and equipment on and as and when needed. My question is this: there's a tendency of the contractor to misuse the material and equipment made available to him, probably because he's not paying for them. How can the contractor be made liable for the wastage, misuse of material and equipment, which is quite common in Mauritius? So the client buy materials and give it to the contractor because they want to save costs. And if they are making misuse, mishandling, and wastage of those, is there any fallback for the client?
Then I will, in this case, I think will be in the client position, right? It's good to check whether how's your award, the contract provisions award to this particular labor contractor. And secondly, is to have the mechanism or system to or procedure for the contractor to request, because as a client very kind and supply all the materials and equipment to the contractor. So however, the client side also must have a mechanism which means to have a procedure for the contractor to request material. Firstly, the contractor also will know what will be the scope of work for the contractor to carry out the work. And the client also know that what will be the scope of work likely will be awarded to the contractor. So from there, basically, for example, the excavation work, what the contractor can estimate what will be the time frame required to carry out this particular excavation work. Then the machinery will be hired by the employer, the client to the contractor. So also set the time limit. If so the contractor already planned that will take 10 days, then the client also will know. So the rental cost for this particular excavator will be around 10 days. And in terms of materials, then what are the materials required? Also, the contractor can put the request form to the client. So what are the material required? What will be the quantity required? And ask the contractor to put up the quantification of record measurement. Then from there, you can estimate the required material. So by this, actually the client able to mitigate the wastages or any misuse of material. In the event really exceeded the required estimated material, the client still able to mitigate the loss, and contractor will require to justify why he require more material, because for construction material is very costly, especially reinforcement bar. So sometimes the client at the better bargaining power may able to procure more rebar, actually reinforcement bar with lower rate. Then the contractor may take this particular rebar off-site to any other business. I don't know.
Okay.
So, but this is the system. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. The next question is, a contractor has been appointed on a labor-only contract. The promoter supply all the equipment. So yes, so the same is from the same person.
Yep.
A contractor has been appointed on a labor-only contract. The promoter supplies all material and equipment on an as and when basis. Which party is liable for ensuring that the labor force are supplied with the appropriate personal protective equipment? Especially, we are in COVID-19 as well. So where do we go in terms of liability in protecting the workers?
I think firstly, also need to check the client contract provisions award to this particular contractor. And if in the contract provided clearly, the labor contractor required to provide personal protective equipment we call PPE, then clearly the contractor required to provide. Unless the contract silent on it, then both parties need to discuss who responsible for this particular PPE, the personal protective equipment.
Okay, thank you. We've got two more questions.
Yep.
What are the key areas in construction contract which you consider need particular or special attention at time of documentation, which most often lead to contractual dispute if not administered properly? So when we start a contract, the lawyers get involved and then they leave us, we get on with it, we get dispute, and the lawyers come back at the end. So what are the key items you think that should be considered?
Right. Okay, thank you. So thank you for your question as well. A very good question. So basically, based on just how my sharing those important documents on times and costs. So where I'm practicing being adjudicators and quite some of the small or large cases, always will dispute arise on the time and cost as well as payment. Then when the parties, especially claimant, when they submit their documents before me, so then many contemporary record or justification of the on cost and time related claims, which is not really up to the expected required standard. So therefore, I just, because of time constraint, I just summarize it based on, you can examine your contract provisions, especially check clearly and notice those important time and cost related provisions, especially EOT, loss and expenses, or variation is a particular practice and procedure provided under the contract.
Okay, we'll see the
sorry,
loss.
one more very important. On the client side, sometimes you have set off. Set off also usually will have important practice and procedure under the contract. And the contractor side, in the event if the client set off, means issue any notice of set off to you, similarly, contractor required to review and check whether you agreeable to this particular set off or not. If not, really also required to reply to this particular client on this particular notice of set off.
All right, thank you very much. And then the next question is, often during tendering process, client negotiates with a preferred contractor who is not necessarily the lowest compliance bidder and goes against the recommendation of the project QS. What should the project QS do in such circumstances, knowing that he is bound by professional ethics, and why? So many occasions, we know we've got the lowest contractor, but the client wanted the second best. So he said to the QS and advisor, I need the second best. Go and lock him in a room, get the best price. So, you know, what should the project QS do in such circumstances? Knowing as well, we want to keep the client happy. And of course, the ethical values attached to us as professional.
Yeah, Neil, I think this is a very interesting and challenging question, especially sounds like APC question under ethics, right? Okay, so I just share based on my observation, right? Firstly, the project QS, of course, must be professional and also have a duty of care to the client. And I believe this particular project QS already carry out the necessary tender evaluation in terms of this particular, all the contractors or all the bidders in terms of their commercial and technical competency, right? So with all, of course, QS more on the commercial evaluation, then those engineers will review the technical submission. So from there, the project QS will gather all this information, come up with a tender evaluation report. Then the project QS will require to come up with a genuine and professional evaluation and put down all the notes and to those respective, whether from lowest to the highest bidders. And without, which means, since you already aware about this particular preferred contractor, firstly, need to check whether this come up with a genuine and professional recommendation and evaluation, and ensure that this particular preferred contractor whether fulfill all the competency or all the requirements under commercial and technical. Then eventually, let's say this particular preferred contractor, the price actually not the lowest, say second or third. However, based on your recommendation, put up written report, submit to client. If the client still find that he doesn't mind to pay premium price for this particular contractor, then eventually still the decision from the client. However, the project QS will require still come up with a professional assessment, come up with all the due diligence with the tender evaluation report. This is my take.
Okay, and just I've got a common question because I can see lots of questions. That's the final question for you. You know, when architect issues drawings and engineers issue drawings and the contractor received it and then he sent an email back to say, please make note, these are additional work. So please, I will put you on notice. Are they allowed to say that? Or do they have to spell out the provision of the contract to say 20.1, we're gonna inform you? Or are they allowed just to send an email? If the contract says electronic mean is accessible, can you just say, please take notice of future delays on an email?
Okay, so if firstly, check your contract provisions, right? What will the practice and procedure under variation or under time, let's say EOT or any loss and expenses, they usually will have practice. So then, like just now, Anil, I mentioned that electronic transmittal is actually valid communication to serve notice, then no problem. Then they also need to examine and check the notice clause, I mean the provisions of the notice, whether the content of the notice, what are the content required. Because sometimes the certain content of the notice is compulsory to note, say pursuant to this clause, because of this, referring to what drawing. So then you must follow the procedure and fulfill the content requirement. Otherwise, just now Anil mentioned those is a little bit just a very surface information, may not be touching to the important time and cost implication.
Okay, and just quick one, last one. There's loads of questions. I didn't expect all these questions coming through. One last question. What's your view on force majeure right now, COVID-19, in your country, in Malaysia, and globally? Do you think it will change the way we view force majeure?
My observation, force majeure right now actually really will change. Especially, I will foresee that the contractor required to mitigate, okay, because of force majeure event. So related to our industry, either globally or in Malaysia, I think being a contractor will require to mitigate. Mitigate in terms of the loss. The loss may have two perspectives. One internally, another one will be external, which means on the client side. Let's say this particular lockdown, once lifted, or we call movement control order lifted, then contractor allowed to resume work. Then from there, contractor will really need to catch up the delay, and also need to ensure those resources, subcontractor, whatever, who already actually away during the lockdown period. So then he need to have a plan to mitigate the loss. Simultaneously, during this COVID period, the contractor or subcontractor will require to mitigate his own loss, which means he need to communicate with his resources, either the subcontractor or the labor or any supplier. So to ensure once the COVID issue over or the lockdown period lifted, then able to really catch up all those resources required to mitigate the loss date or loss progress previously, to catch up the progress with the minimum impact to the client.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chong Wei. We've got lots of questions, of course. I'm sure we will need to organize something else again. Thank you very much indeed. Before we finish off, I've got a few more slides. So we'll thank Mr. Chong Wei properly at the end. So again, guys, put your hands up for Mr. Chong Wei for his time. It's almost 10 o'clock in Malaysia. Thank you for being here. We can't thank you enough from Mauritius. So I'm just gonna put on a few things quickly on my side. I wanted to share with you in terms of the emotive side of contractual letters. Right now, when COVID started in Mauritius on the 19th, 20th of March, we noticed there was lots of notices coming in. And with that come anxiety, come depression, come all sorts. So this is what happened when you get a claim. The blood pressure goes up. I think I've touched that before. And you don't know what to do. You're really, really angry about the whole situation. Next up, you have butterfly in your stomach. You're not too sure how to respond. You're worried about the whole situation, what the client will do. There's also the flight and fight response or fear, which is really important again, and something we need to touch on as well. So these are all things that happen not just to me, to you, but everybody else, which we need to manage. Take a deep breath, talk to someone. Don't really go into it and reply to email, especially my next, when you're really angry, you pick up the phone, you're talking to everybody, but more importantly, you're starting king on the keyboard, where you're actually saying, I disagree, in red using 200 fonts or 100 to say, don't do that, take your time, take a deep breath. Very, very important to go through that. So this is, to me, very important, where you need to manage your emotion from the contractual side. The record, which Chong Wei just mentioned, is very important. But managing your emotions, managing your emotional intelligence, very important in a time where we're all going through hard time. Let the contractor do it. It's part of the job. It's their right to put the claims in. But what we need to be aware of is your emotional side. Don't get stressed about it. It's a game. People are putting the claims in. You just need to manage it at the end. So what comes in at the end is negotiation, which is absolutely vital when you're talking about it. Already in my project, we're already talking to contractor about how do we get out of this, because the contractor is at a loss, the client is at a loss, the government is at a loss. So where are we going to get the money to bail out? This is where negotiation comes in. Very, very important. And I suggest you do some reading, some, get yourself used to the negotiation skill where you can talk to people, but talking is really, really important. So this one is, thank you everybody for your question. So just to conclude, I got this quote, very important, where don't hand your work over to a supplier hoping that they will produce the magic. They won't. Because a number of times we put design and build stuff thinking that the contractor will sort it out. They won't. They will come back with 100 IRs, 100 requests for information, and it won't let you go. So it's for you to have that vision that allows your supplier to expand into something he or she hasn't done before, but you must show no fear in actually designing it. If we don't understand how that particular component is put together, we are in a problem which will rise to dispute and claims. So we are now on in a very interesting areas. I was reading about Zoom. We are all on Zoom platform right now. Zoom is the most downloadable app in the entire world in March 2020. It's crazy. So I've been talking about this slide for a long, long time, where we had the first industrial revolution with the steam and gas, and then second revolution where electricity kicks in, and then the third where automation was coming in, and now we are really going into clouds. So we're looking at automation, drones. Right now we're in a cloud where we are combining with different parties around the world, and this is where we're heading. We have digital engineering, we have BIM, we have sensors, we have exoskeleton where people are putting equipment on them to lift heavy materials. We have VR, similar to VAR in football, big data, blockchain technology, 3D printing. We are in an environment where we are ordering taxi through apps. Circular economy will be something COVID-19, very important. We have the artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. All these things are really kicking off. So once again, as I think Chong Wei mentioned as well, is about the leadership skill. Very, very important that we get that going through. So before I conclude, there's a crow sitting on a tree doing nothing. The rabbit saw the same thing, and the rabbit said, look, I want to do the same thing as the crow. The rabbit was sitting there nicely when the fox came and ate the rabbit. So the moral story is to sit and do nothing. You need to be right on top. And that's the nature of the game. So unless we are the crow, as an industry, we need to constantly rethink, which we are doing right now with all your support. And we're going to try to work collaboratively. To me, and I think what Chong Wei said as well, innovate or die, sink or swim. I want to just share a small video with you, because I know we are all depressed. We are locked down. We're locked down with the family. It's not ideal. Many of you want to get out because the kids are all up and down you, and you're 24 hours with your spouse, your husband, and everything else. So let me just show you a video just to make sure that the industry is here and we can't get back on it. So a quick video. Let me just see if the screen is on as well. So yeah, all on. So let me just share that with you. Okay, off we go. Can you hear me, Chong Wei?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for this. I want to share with you a book which I have, and I've been reading it for a few years now. It's called Construction Claim, a short guide for contractors by Paul Netcher. And what he says on that, which is very catchy, I've been involved with over 120 projects and all have had variation claim. Some for millions of dollars, almost doubling the project value. Variation are inevitable process with construction project. There will be changes and delays no matter how well they are planned and executed. Yet, more than 99% of my claim was settled amicably, and most of what we claim was approved. More importantly, we completed further project with these same employers. So what we've learned today with Mr. Chong Wei is about how get the skill to ensure that, we're not kind of, upsetting the client with contract. It's a way of doing it, and this book will help you as well. And of course, Mr. Chong Wei is here if you need further advice. I wanted to share finally a book with you in this time of unprecedented time and surreal what we're going through. Is the fourth industrial revolution, and he talks about let us together shape a future that works for all by putting people first, empowering them, and constantly reminding ourselves that all of these new technologies are first and foremost tool made by people for people. So it's really good reading, something you can get into. So I would like to thank you for Chong Wei, but quickly in terms of CPD coming up, I'll be looking at well-being and mental health in this type of environment, what we currently are. I'll be looking at the future of real estate from few valuers, and they're keen to share. Also, we'll be looking at leadership through uncertainty. How do we get out of that in terms of leadership? And I'm speaking to one of my colleagues from the UK in terms of there are currently projects on site in the UK right now, and how health and safety on site are being managed around COVID-19. So very, very important, something we'll be touching on as well. So take care and be safe. And could you please raise your hand for Mr. Chong Wei, please, because he's been amazing. Again, it's 10 o'clock right now, and I can see lots of hands being raised for Mr. Chong Wei. So, Mr. Chong Wei, any final word from your side before we conclude, please?
Thank you, everyone, and also for your support. However, I think the important will be, since we are talking about contractual practice, right? So it's good to really review and reflect all your contract administration practice during this period, because we are staying at home, and also you can review all your contractual records or documentations. It's a very good time to tidy up and get ready and to submit once the lockdown or the MCO period lifted. So, and I wish all of you safe and healthy, and thank you for your attention.